So, welcome back to the next session, and in this session we will discuss about what happens when there is a internal and external pressure for the change, right. So, we will try to summarize and see that how this internal and external pressure which is coming from the internal environment as well as external environment are going to ensure that organizations bring about certain changes, and then what are the different kind of changes both incremental and radical that happens, and accordingly what are the things that need to be done to ensure that the change is going to be successful. So, what we will do to start with, we will see that we need to identify, and we have been able to identify what are the various forces which drive the need for major organizational changes. Some of them we have discussed, but here in a more comprehensive way we are going to see what are those factors which bring about a change, right. See, we have at this in this slide we have tried to see that there are three different levels of understanding. First, we will look at what are the different kind of changes that is happening. Next, as a result of these changes both internally and externally, the global level also with the competition in the markets internally and externally, what kind of threats and opportunities these changes have created, and based on this what kind of changes organizations have gone for, right. Because what we are going to discuss next is the different kind of changes or different type of changes. Now, if you look at this, you will find four major headings under the kind of changes are the driving forces which have created major organizational changes, that is technological changes, international economic integration, markets maturation, and also political, that is fall of communist and socialist regimes. Now, if you look at this major driving force for the change is the technology, right. Now, when we are talking about technology, we have moved from a more mechanical way of doing to what we call today having a more flexible manufacturing systems, which is added with what you call computer aided design, computer aided integrated manufacturing, right. So, this is related to manufacturing services. Similarly, you will also find that lot of changes has happened in the services sector, and there the IT, especially the information and communication technology, has played an important role. Now, when we are looking at technological changes in both the manufacturing sector as well as services sector, it has brought lot of significant changes, more efficiency, higher productivity on the part of the organizations. So, if organizations are not going to change themselves or to compete with in terms of the technological advancement, then they will not be able to compete. Because the advantage that these technological changes have, that because you can go be more faster and better in terms of productivity, you can better maintain quality, you can better maintain your standardization of the products, right. And then using IT you can better communicate, you can collect data fast, you can process them, right. Even in transportation also you will find that IT has lot of use, and you will find that now people are using GPS in supply chain or customer relationship management. Now, people are connected across the world through information networks, right. So, the internet has played a big role. Similarly, you will find that yes, you can connect people globally at any point of time, right. So, these are the major results of what you call the technological changes, right. And there are a lot of changes which happened in the field of technology, both related to manufacturing sector as well as services sector. Now, coming to the economic factors, the major economic factors globally, what actually have happened. Now, if you think the global economic factors, the most important thing is reducing the tariffs, right. Most of the organizations not only in India, but abroad also, who have been doing business internationally, they are following certain norms as per trade and tariff, which is decided by the nations, which is known as General Agreement on Trade and Tariff. So, the trade and tariff, basically in international trade, the tariff is decided internationally, and most of the nations have become favorable to go for less tariffs. Okay. and this helps organizations to sell their products internationally, right. So, that is one benefit which has come out of what you call international economic integration. Another thing is currencies have been linked with exchange rates, right. So, you will find a lot of changes in fluctuations in the currency, local currency of any country depending upon the exchange rates of that particular currency with dollar and other important currencies, right. So, you find that yes, if you look at the case of India, you know that the rupee value is depreciating, right, because the dollar value is going up. It is related with what? It is related because the currencies have been linked, and when currencies are linked, you have a floating exchange rate, and this has also its impact on businesses, because for the same thing either going to pay less or more depending upon whether your currency is being appreciating or depreciated, right. And then there is a more global capital flow. Now, you have institutional investors not only in India, but also from abroad, what we call foreign institutional investors coming and investing money in Indian businesses and Indian organizations, right. So, you can say that yes, this kind of economic integration has really helped organizations to grow and develop, but for that you need to go for certain changes. Now, another factor which is very important and we have not discussed it till date is what is happening to the markets. Now, if you look at some of the markets in developed countries and developing countries, you can understand this situation. Most of the markets in developed countries are already matured and saturated. There is no opportunity for growth and development. So, if these developed countries markets have matured themselves, then what will happen? They look for new markets, and where are these new markets? These new markets are in developing countries and underdeveloped countries. So, they would try to sell their products and services in developing countries and underdeveloped countries, right. The reason is that most of these developed markets, whether it is Japan or US or Europe, you will find the growth is very low, right. So, since there is no domestic growth for these organizations in developed countries, okay, they try to aggressively put their agenda to sell their products and services in those countries where they find an opportunity to sell, where there is a market for them, maybe India, maybe China, maybe other countries, right. And as a result, what they want? They want to go for more and more deregulation by these countries where they want to sell their products. So, they want these countries to go for having less import duty, right, so that they can sell their products and services, right. But this is also creating a lot of challenges for the markets that we will discuss, and then there are political factors. If you look at globally what is happening, you at least few years back you have been living in a bipolar world, which was dominated by USSR and USA, but now USSR has disintegrated, right. There are a number of countries which have formed. So, if when this communist regime was down and the socialist regime came into existence, so what was the outcome of these kind of changes which was happening globally, right. Now, most of these countries are moving to a more capitalistic market system, not what you call a socialist market system. So, most of them have moved to create a more market oriented system in their countries, and similarly they have also moved to more and more privatization of the organizations, right. You will find that some countries, except for few institutions, everything has been privatized. Like if you to go to say earlier, some of the countries like UK and say Russia used to have their own airlines like Lufthansa or British Airways, but now most of these companies have been privatized by the government, right. So, most of the organizations have moved to become private, and when you move to privatization, it creates its own challenges for the organization. So, what I am trying to tell you that these are the major driving forces internationally, which also affect directly or indirectly the organization, right. Now, what kind of impact it has, that is what we are going to discuss in the next point, which is related to it brings about global changes, competition and markets. It means now you have an open market, across the world, you are going to compete internationally, right. Look at any product or services that we have today. In banking, in insurance, right, in manufacturing sector, there is a lot of competition, because you have products and services, okay, which are more cost effective compared to our products and services. So, that has created a lot of competition, and then lot of changes happening at the global level, because you need to follow these rules and regulations if a member of these agreements, and you have to go by them, right. Reducing tariffs, linking your capital currencies with the other countries, and following those exchange rate norms, right. And you also allow more capital inflow in your organizations. You know that Indian government has allowed capital inflow up to 49% in many major sectors, okay. And some sectors they have even allowed up to 51%, where they can have majority of stakes in those companies, right. So, all this is going to change the way the businesses have been done, right. Now, at the macro level we have been discussing about these things. So, this has created lot of threats as well as opportunities for the organization. So, what are the threats? More competition, it creates it for the domestic companies. Look at any domestic companies, say Maruti. Maruti had a monopolistic situation few years back, right, but now you have lot of companies which are selling their vehicles from the international market, right, whether it is Honda, right, it is Toyota, right, Hyundai. So, most of these companies have created lot of competition for the market. So, on the one side it creates competition, but also creates opportunities to capture markets. So, if you are able to compete, if you are able to change yourself to the expectations, probably it creates an opportunity. Then speed of services and responsiveness, how fast you respond to the customer requirements, how fast you respond to the services that is required by the customers, that has also changed. Then international competition, now you are not going to compete internally, but internationally, right. So, these kind of threats have been created by these changes which have been talking about at the macro level, right. Now, this has also created lot of opportunity if you look at it, like now the entire world is going to be a market. If you have good quality standard product, it is more innovative, then you can sell it anywhere in the world, right. But at the same time, it has also created certain things, like if you look at the GATT norms and other kind of things, the barriers, the regulations have been reduced. So, if you have less barriers, then the entry to the market become easy, right. If there is more barrier, then the entry to the market become difficult. I am talking about the international markets, right. So, with less barriers and more markets, it is providing opportunities even to Indian companies to ensure that they are able to offer their products and services internationally. Okay. So, this has created an opportunity, but accordingly you need to change yourself so that you can provide quality products and services to compete with international players in the market, right. And similarly, you can go to any kind of market anywhere, right. So, the entire world becomes your market. So, how Indian organizations are responding to these changes, or any kind of organizations in any country are going to respond to these changes. Now, if you look at the responses, it means that these are the activities which have been followed by the organizations. They are trying to re-engineer means that they are trying to look at each and every business process and see how they can make it more efficient. They are going for what you call moving from a taller structure to flatter structures, okay. Organizing around teams and creating networks, trying to be more horizontal in their structure, right. Offering lot of quality programs to maintain quality of the products, so that they can compete internationally, right. They are going for Six Sigma, they are going for quality circles, they also go for what you call total quality management. So, these are the different kind of quality programs which have been initiated by Indian organizations, so that they are able to maintain quality in their product and processes, right. And at the same time, they are also trying to come up with new technologies and products to compete with them, right. Because if you are going to compete with your old products and old technology, probably you are not going to be successful. So, these are the different kind of challenges which have been created by these macro level organizational factors, the change factors, and in response to these factors, most of the organizations, Indian organizations have gone for them, right. They are trying to re-engineer their business processes, structuring around horizontal works and teams, right, going for a lot of quality programs and bringing about a change in the products, right. And these are the activities that they have carried out. Now, coming to the strategies that they have done, right. So, as a part of their strategic move, they have gone for mergers, joint ventures, acquisitions and these kind of things. Now, you will find that many Indian companies have gone for a lot of acquisitions of international companies. It is a strategic move to integrate their business, right, both to capture better markets, okay, and also see that there is a better integration financially and strategically to ensure that they are able to compete at the international level, right. They have created global teams, they have gone for all kind of change, even they have gone for change in their strategy, that how they are going to do their business, and also about the cultural changes. Why I am talking about these things? Because what we are going to discuss next is that see what kind of changes organizations are going for, right, in terms of strategy, culture, technology, people, in order to cope up with the challenges which has been created by both the external pressure, the internal pressure, and also internationally what is happening, right. So, that is why here we are going to see that what kind of changes organizations are going for and what strategies they have adopted, so that they ensure they are successful and they are able to compete in the market. Now, after discussing these forces, you will also find that sometimes some of the organizations are not able to change themselves or they do not want to go for change. So, if either you are going to learn and improve or you become rigid and you do not go for a change, right. You will find that yes, some organizations are more adaptive, they continuously improve and innovate their products and services and they are successful. So, they learn and in order to become a learning organization, right. But some organizations are not going for that kind of things, right, and they are not able to adapt to the pressure that is there. For example, they have not gone for re-engineering, they have not gone for total quality management. So, still they are selling old products and services. So, what will happen? They are not going to be successful in the market, right. So, ultimately they have not been able to respond properly, effectively, and they have been very slow to respond to the changes that is happening in the market, right. So, you have to see that how managers in the organizations can go for adopting in a very innovative way to see that whatever their expectations are in terms of achieving growth, development, market share and profitability is achieved. So, there is less gap between their performance and what they want, right. Sometimes there is a pressure on the managers not to go for these kind of things, okay, because their mental map and the decision making process is restricted, right, and this is going to restrict their vision for the future. Okay. And they think that they have been doing their business well and then they could go for it. Okay. So, basically there is a trap what we know as success syndrome. So, they are being trapped by the success syndrome, because if you are being trapped by the success syndrome, then you are not going to be successful. Let us see what is this trap of success syndrome. So, it starts with prolonged period of success which creates the success syndrome, right. So, this results in complacency on the part of the organization, become arrogant, right. You codify certain things and then there is a more internal focus to increase efficiency, you are not market orientation, right. So, this results complacency, arrogance and internal focus basically results in learning disability. You are not going to learn something that is new. Outcome? Yes, it is very known. Your focus on customers, cost and all kind of things goes down. So, you are not able to focus on your customers, your cost goes up and you are not going to be innovative at all, right. Then whenever there is a change in the environment, under those circumstances you are not able to align your activities or you are not able to cope up with the challenges of the external environment. It results in poor performance, your performance keep on dying, and then in order to respond to these poor performance or declining performance, you sometimes try to rationalize, oh, theek hai, sometimes this happens, we will move again, we will keep on doing something better. So, you focus more on internal efficiency without looking at the market and the environment what is happening. So, either you try to rationalize what you have been doing or you deny the facts, both are not good. Then you are trying to do something more, and then you create a spiral through which ultimately die. The best case that I can give an example here is of Hindustan Motors. One of the most successful organizations does not exist today, because they did not focus on the customers, the cost went up, right. They did not go for change in the products which they have been offering, no change, and when competition came in, they were not able to respond to the challenges. Performance went down like anything. First they tried to improve their internal efficiency, they did not work, and then ultimately we all know what happened to Hindustan Motors today, right. So, this type of success could be something that is very bad. Now, the question is that why organizations do not change when there is a pressure for the change, right. So, they think that yes, environment is something that is objective or is a cognitive construction. What I mean to say that yes, how you consider the environment and how you respond to the environment, right. If your interpretation of the environment is bad and you are not able to correctly interpret and accurately assess the level of these environmental factors which are going to affect the organization, then it is not good. So, then it become rigid. So, you become rigid, then it is a case of failure. So, you must consider environment as an objective entity to ensure that you are able to properly assess these things, the conditions, and see how they are going to determine what kind of changes you want to bring about in the organization, right. So, two kind of error that you may is type 1 and type 2. Type 1 error where environment is good stable, but you consider a thing that is environment is turbulent, it is uncertain, and you take certain unnecessary actions, that is also not good, right. In second case, environment is stable, but manager's perception is different. So, they do not take any action, right. So, both is good. Sorry, the second point should be environment is unstable, and so they do not perceive that the environment is unstable. So, they do not take any action. So, this also creates problem. Now, another factor is forces for change and forces for stability, right. So, where is the balance? If the forces of change are higher or dominant than the forces of stability, then you go for a change, but if the forces of stability is higher, then you do not go for a change, right. So, you have to see that how stakeholders look at the forces which are creating change, right. So, if you find that these forces of change are better or dominant, then definitely you go for a change, and if you find that your forces of stability are more dominant, then they do not change in the face of the environmental pressure, right. Why? They also try to provide some kind of rationale, right, and this leads to decline, right, and they think that they are able to control certain things and they are not able to control certain things, right. The rationales that they say that yes, better control, more stability, right, but if you do not have control, then what will happen? Less stability, and then in case of less stability, you do not go for a change, right. Now, we will discuss further what are the various forces of change and forces of stability. Forces of change, when you try to adapt to the environment, right, there is a cost commitment, make sure that yes, HR variables are not fixed cost, but this is variable cost. You make sure that the capital market, right, which requires more investments on their returns. So, if they want more return on their investments, then it means that you need to go for a change, right. And similarly, you need to control your hierarchy. So, and ensure that there is a greater power through performance measures. What does it mean? It means that you need to ensure that you are giving more power to the people and also make them accountable for their performance, that is more important. Okay. And you respond to the competitive advantage through responding to the market conditions. So, whatever changes is happening in the market, if you are not going to respond to this, then you are not able to achieve competitive advantage. So, these factors basically could be said to be as forces of change. Now, coming to the forces of stability, it means that you have to slice certain practices and systems and then you go by that. You do not want to make any change in your power structure, your past practices, you think that they are good enough and then you should go by that, right. And then you believe try to reduce your transaction cost, right. Then it is also not good, because you try to bring more efficiency internally without looking at what is happening internally, right. Then you try to achieve advantage through stable organizational relationships. You make sure that there is a good relationship, people are working, coordinating, integrating their activities, but ultimately it does not happen, because this requires some kind of instability in the structure and relationship, so that it brings about some kind of changes, right. And you believe more in social capital, you think that if people are working, they are with you, they have good relationship, it is going to help you. But in the light of what we have discussed, say macroeconomic and micro environmental factors, and also internal environmental pressure, external environmental pressure, it is not possible for organizations to remain stable, right. Then you think that is you are able to predict the future, and that is how you try to reduce your uncertainty. Though the fact is that future is uncertain, it is very difficult unless you scan the environment properly and respond to the challenges. Your productivity goes your predictability goes down, right. So, these are the forces of change and forces of stability that we discussed. Now, the last point here is bridging or adopting or buffering. What is your strategy to maintain effectiveness? Are you want to be adopting in nature? Yes, adopting in the sense that you want to maintain effectiveness by adapting parts of the organization to the change, especially relating to the external environment, right. But buffering is that we try to look at your internal environment, you try to bring more efficiency internally and see that what kind of internal adjustments can be made to be more productive and effective, right. So, if there is external environmental pressure and if you do not go for adapting to those changes, then it becomes very difficult for you to bring about any kind of changes, right, and you do not change. See, when we are talking about bridging and buffering, it relates to two kind of orientation. One is internal orientation, we try to increase internal efficiency through buffering activities, and the other one is market orientation, where you are going for bridging, where you look at what is happening in the external environment and accordingly try to adapt yourself to the changes which is happening in the external environment, right. So, bridging is related to adaptation to the external environment, and that is where you have more market orientation, right, so that you can better compete. When I am talking about buffering, this is related to what you call more internal orientation, where you try to increase your internal efficiency by making certain internal adjustments. Okay. For example, giving more training to the people, so that become they productive, or changing part of the system, right. So, that is where you make some internal adjustments within the organization to bring more efficiency, but how long you can go on keep on changing unless you respond to the external environmental factors, it is not going to be very successful. Now, we have talked about internal incremental and radical changes, right. So, if you look at the differences between incremental changes, we already talked about, like it is a continuous progression, right. We try to maintain equilibrium, so that there is no punctuation, right. It affects a part of the organization, and you go through the normal structures and the management processes to go for incremental changes. So, this I am just trying to give a recap between what we have discussed so far, and then if you want to bring a technology, it is going to affect a part only, right, and then you try to see that there is a product improvement. But in comparison to incremental changes, when you move to a more radical or transformational change, which we will discuss later, what happens? Frame breaking best, it means that you do not go for continuous progression, you try to bring to change everything at the same time, right, and then you try to create a new equilibrium, right. So, once everything is in place, you try to see that then this new equilibrium is established, and then again actually when this punctuated equilibrium happens, what goes on? You go for continuous increment, then move up radically, you go for some kind of transformational change, you come back. But when we are talking about radical or transformational changes, actually you try to settle new agreement, new equilibrium, right. So, in order to go for a new equilibrium, you go for total transformation. At the same time, you go for a change in the technology, you go for a change in the structure, system, process, culture, everything change at the same time, right. So, you create a new structure, you go for a new technology, you offer new products and services, right. So, if this happens, so these are the extremes of what you call the radical changes, but not necessary that you are going for totally incremental changes or radical changes. Sometimes you are going to be in between the two, right. So, this is what we know as first order change or second order change. So, first order is incremental, it is done to maintain the and develop the organization, right. When you go for continuous small changes to bring about change in the structure, or second order changes where going to be totally transformational, where you bring about fundamental changes in the way the organization functions, right. You are going for downsizing, not only downsizing, but you go for other kind of things at the same time, right. So, you go for restructuring, downsizing, delayering, all kind of things, re-engineering. So, all these are second order changes. But in between these first order and second order changes, there is also a mid order change, right. This is what we know as between the first and second order change, there is a mid range changes, right. That is where this punctuated equilibrium comes into the picture, right. You are continuously improving and suddenly there is a spike, right. So, it overcomes the inertia, but it is not revolutionary, it avoid the alarming implications of large scale changes. So, it is not totally transformational, but continuous improvement is there, like see it was something like this going like this, and then suddenly there is a spike and then you come back and then again it is like that. So, this is what we have been discussing about punctuated equilibrium. So, long period of stability followed by short burst of change and instability. And the third is robust transformations. So, you create conditions where you can go for changes which are going to be very, very powerful, right, which helps you to come out with new capabilities, so that you can better perform and compete in the situation of competition. Now, between first order and second order change that we have been talking about, see what are the different kind of changes which we will take up later, right. These are the major kind of changes which is a part of any organization. That is where the locus of change happens, that is in the product and services, strategy and structure, people and culture and the technology. And this is a result of what you call the market, right. So, there is the external environmental pressure and also there is the international environment, there is the market we are operating, this is the organization. Now, the organization has to change in this and respond by bringing about certain changes in these things and make sure that this is in alignment with the and fine tuned and is able to adapt also with the market requirements, and see that yes, it is very well within the purview of the international market. So, that you are not going to compete only internally, but also externally. Thank you very much.